Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to briefly explain aggregate functions in Tableau. By default, Tableau uses sum as the aggregation. So when you move sales onto the rows shelf, then you'll realize that the aggregation is sum. But this is not always the most appropriate way to get aggregate data. If you need to use a different function, then you can click here and then see here measure sum. And there are other aggregations on Tableau as you see other than sum. So the types of aggregation supported by Tableau include all these options. Let me briefly explain each of them. Sum, the aggregation adds up the measures values. Average, this aggregation gives you the arithmetic mean of the measures values. Median, this aggregation gives you the median of the measures values. Count and count distinct, these two aggregations count the occurrences of different values in two ways. Let's imagine that you have 1000 rows in a dataset and you have only 30 unique sales transactions. If you use count aggregation, the result is going to be 1000. But if you use count distinct aggregation, on the other hand, the result is going to be only 30. So therefore, count distinct only counts unique occurrences in the data. Minimum and maximum return the smallest and the largest value, respectively. Percentile, this aggregation returns the value for the selected percentile chosen from the submenu. 5, 10, 25, 50, 75, 90, 95 are the options. Standard deviation and standard deviation population, these aggregate functions returns the sample standard deviation and population standard deviation, respectively. If you use the sample, then use the standard deviation. If you use the population, then use the population standard deviation. Variance and variance population, these aggregate functions return the sample variance and population variance, respectively. For dimensions and attributes, by default, dimensions are also aggregated because all unique values are returned when a dimension is added to a view. So we can add, for instance, here, we can add subcategory onto the rows, and you see we have aggregation here too. The values are then used to group and aggregate the measures added. You can prevent this behavior by choosing attribute from a dimensions context menu. So you can click here and choose attribute. Then the information can be used for labels and tooltips, but it won't influence how the data is aggregated. Another important point is that the null values or missing values don't flow into the calculations of the aggregate functions. While this is not an issue when you are aggregating to a sum, it does matter whether the null values are ignored or individually included as zeros when calculating averages. If you want to include null values in an aggregation as zero values, we first need to create a calculated field from data pane. And let's say null values. And then here we are going to use ifNull function, and then in the parentheses sales, and then we have 0. Here we are using sales as an example. This formula checks whether a value is null and if so replaces it with 0 or else returns the actual sales value. And this is a brief introduction to aggregate functions. Thank you for watching this video.